Today is July 19th, 2012. Dhammasukha Meditation Center. The sutta tonight is the Mahāvedalla Sutta, the greater series of questions and answers. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Sawati in Jeta's Grove, Anathan Pandika's park. Then, when it was evening, the Venerable Mahā Koṭṭhita rose from meditation, went to the Venerable Sāriputta, exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Venerable Sāriputta, one who is unwise, friend, with reference to what is this said, one who is unwise? One does not wisely understand. One does not wisely understand, friend. That's why it was said, one who is unwise. And what doesn't one wisely understand? One doesn't wisely understand this is suffering. Okay, in the Samyutta Nikaya, number 14.4, this is called the Brahmins and ascetics and Brahmas. Monks, as to those ascetics and Brahmins who do not understand these things, that is the first noble truth. The origin of these things, that is the second noble truth. The cessation of these things, third noble truth. And the way leading to the cessation of these things. Now, what are these things they do not understand, whose origin they don't understand, whose cessation they don't understand, and the way leading to whose cessation they don't understand? They do not understand aging and death, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. They do not understand birth. See, you're going through all of the links of dependent origination. Each link has the previous link as the origin, or as the suffering, and the origin is the previous link, and the cessation is 6 R's. Okay? Now, here is a key phrase. Those who do not understand, I do not consider to be ascetics among ascetics or Brahmins among Brahmins. These venerable ones who do not, by realizing it for themselves with direct knowledge in this very life, enter and dwell in the goal of asceticism and or the goal of Brahmanhood. Now, what does that say? That says that if you don't see the links of dependent origination, you're not going to attain Nibbana. It's pretty plain, which is very much missing in 95% of the people that practice, or 99% of the people that practice meditation. They miss this connection. You hear me talking a lot about dependent origination, about feeling and contact and clinging and habitual tendency, because that's the backbone of the teaching. This is the essence of the teaching. This is the only way that will lead you to Nibbana. by seeing and recognizing these links of dependent origination. So, one who is unwise. And what doesn't one wisely understand? One doesn't wisely understand this is suffering. Every link is suffering. One doesn't wisely understand this is the origin of the suffering. The previous link is the origin of that link arising. Now, I make such a big emphasis on craving. Why? Because that's the start of your ego identification with everything that arises. That's the very start of it. Everything before that arises because of past action. Then when you get to craving, I've given you the key about the tension and tightness in your head. What happens when you let go of that tension and tightness? Clinging doesn't arise. And if clinging doesn't arise, habitual tendency won't arise. If habitual tendency doesn't arise, then birth doesn't arise. If birth doesn't arise, sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair don't arise. It's that simple. Now there's two different kinds of nibbana. One is the mundane kind of nibbana, and one is the super mundane nibbana. The mundane nibbana you will experience many thousands, many hundreds of thousands of times before you get to see the super mundane nibbana. I wrote about this on a website. There was I was joined up with a group that was into meditation and that sort of thing, and I came out and said that, and they were all shocked. Where did you hear that? How do you know that? Well, I practice it, and this is how monks teach. So, one does not wisely understand this is a cessation of suffering. What does that mean? Now you can say that there is craving. There's the origin of craving, there's the cessation of craving, and the way leading to the cessation of craving. What is that? Come on. 6 R's. And that's true too. I mean, but I was looking for a specific. One does not wisely understand. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. One does not wisely understand. One does not wisely understand, friend. That is why it is said, one who is unwise. Saying, good friend, the Venerable Mahā Koṭṭhita. Mahā Koṭṭhita was foremost in the Buddhist sasana in sitting in meditation. That's all he did. So the Venerable Mahā Koṭṭhita delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Sāriputta's words. Then he asked a further question. One who is wise. One who is wise is said, friend, with reference to what was this said, one who is wise. One wisely understands. One wisely understands, friend. That's why it is said, one who is wise. What does one wisely understand? One wisely understands this is suffering. One wisely understands this is the origin of suffering. One wisely understands this is the cessation of suffering. One wisely understands this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. One wisely understands, friend. That's why it is said, one who is wise. Now, this is one of the reasons that I say every time you hear wise or wisdom, it's talking about the links of dependent origination. One of the problems that we have, especially in English, is that we have standard definitions, but the definitions for Buddhism are decidedly different. Like ignorance. The word ignorance, everybody thinks you're stupid. And it doesn't have anything to do with that. It means you're ignoring the Four Noble Truths. So there's a special kind of language that you have to be able to, if you want to teach, you have to be able to show other people this language. That's one of the reasons I'm more interested in definitions, because there are very specific definitions and meanings for these words that are used here. But if a person isn't taught that, you go and you say, well, what is... I went to a church one time, and this minister talked for 15 minutes about developing wisdom, and he never told you what wisdom was. Wow. So you talk to the ordinary person, they'll give you the definition just like for mindfulness. It means to be mindful. What is wisdom? It means to be wise. What does that mean? So having very specific definitions is a really important part of this practice. Consciousness is said, friend, with reference to what is consciousness said? It cognizes. It cognizes, friend. That's why consciousness is said. What does it cognize? It cognizes this is pleasant. It cognizes this is painful. It cognizes this is neither painful nor pleasant. It cognizes. Now, when you recognize, that means you're using your memory and you're not in the present moment. The only time you can actually cognize anything is when you're in the present moment. And you see something similar, then you start thinking, oh, I've already seen something like this before. So you're recognizing, and you're out of the present moment because you're getting into your conceptual thinking. Every thought is a concept. Direct experience doesn't have anything to do with thinking. Being in the present moment means you see and you cognize what's happening in that moment. This is why consciousness says, wisdom and consciousness, friend, are these states conjoined or disjoined? And is it possible to separate each of these states from the other in order to describe the difference between them? Wisdom and consciousness, friends, these states are conjoined, not disjoined. And it is impossible to separate each of these states from the other in order to describe the difference between them. For what one wisely understands. Now remember, wisely is talking about the links. That one cognizes. And what one cognizes, that one wisely understands. Easy, right? It's only taken me 15 years to figure all this stuff out. Not bad. That is why these states are conjoined, not disjoined. And it is impossible to separate each of these states from the other in order to describe the difference between them. So Mahā Koṭṭhita just got told you can't separate them. Okay? Next question. What's the difference between wisdom and consciousness, these states that are conjoined, not disjoined? The difference, friend, between wisdom and consciousness, these states that are conjoined, not disjoined, is this. Wisdom is to be developed, and consciousness is to be fully understood. See how you can't have one without the other. Feeling is said, friend, with reference to what is feeling said? It feels. It feels, friend. That is why feeling is said. What does it feel? It feels pleasure, it feels pain, it feels neither pain nor pleasure. It feels, friend. That's why feeling is said. Perception, friend, is said, friend, with reference to what is perception said. It perceives, friend. That is why perception is said. What does it perceive? It perceives blue. In other words, you're starting to get into your conceptual naming of things. It perceives yellow, it perceives red, it perceives white, it perceives, friend. That's why perception is said. Feeling, perception, and consciousness, friend, are these states conjoined or disjoined? And is it possible to separate each of these states from the other in order to describe the difference between them? Feeling, perception, and consciousness, friend, these states are conjoined, not disjoined. And it is impossible to separate each of these states from the others in order to describe the difference between them. For what one feels, that one perceives. And what one perceives, that one cognizes. Now, think about the 5 aggregates. You have body, feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. But actually, these 3 are conjoined. So if you want to be absolutely precise, there aren't 5 aggregates, there are 3 aggregates. Body, feeling, perception, and consciousness, and formations. That is why these states are conjoined, not disjoined, and it is impossible to separate each of these states from the others in order to describe the difference between them. Friend, what can be known by purified mind consciousness, released from the 5 faculties? Friend, by purified mind consciousness, released from the five faculties, the base of infinite space can be known thus. Space is infinite. The base of infinite consciousness can be known thus. Consciousness is infinite. The base of nothingness can be known thus. There is nothing. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the arupa jhanas, because that is a mind state. Okay? Friend, with what does one understand a state that can be known? Friend, one understands a state that can be known with the eye of wisdom. What does that mean? What is the eye of wisdom?
The ability to see depending on origination.
Close but no cigar.
The faculty developed to see the
No cigar. What is the eye of wisdom?
The thing that actually sees consciousness unfold.
Getting closer.
Awareness without craving.
The eye of wisdom is what cognizes. And you can only cognize when there is no craving in your mind at that time. That's what the eye of wisdom is all about. Friend, what is the purpose of wisdom? The purpose of wisdom, friend, is direct knowledge. Its purpose is full understanding. Its purpose is abandoning. Makes sense, huh? What are you abandoning? Any belief that whatever arises is personal. And that means no more craving. Friend, how many conditions are there for the arising of right view? Friend, there are two conditions for the arising of right view. The voice of another person and wise attention. Why do you need the voice of another person? Because you can't figure it out on your own. That's actually the truth. And what voice do we use? We use the Buddha's voice. Because he's the one that figured it out. Doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm too dumb to figure this kind of stuff out. These are the two conditions for the arising of right view. Friend, by how many factors is right view assisted? When it has deliverance of mind for its fruit, deliverance of mind for the path, and deliverance of mind for the fruit. When it has deliverance by wisdom for its path, and deliverance by wisdom for its path and fruition. Never a dull moment around here. Friend, right view is assisted by 5 factors. When it has deliverance of mind for its path, deliverance of mind for its path and fruition. When it has deliverance by wisdom for its path, and deliverance by wisdom for its path and fruition. Here, friend, right view is assisted by virtue, learning, discussion, serenity, and insight. Right view is assisted by these 5 factors. Right view assisted by these 5 factors has deliverance of mind for its path, deliverance of mind for its path and fruition. It has deliverance of by wisdom for its path, deliverance by wisdom for its path and fruition. Friend, how many kinds of distractions are there? There are these 3 kinds of distraction, friend. Sense, fear, distraction, material, fine material distraction, and immaterial distraction. Now, I changed the word from being, because that's not really as close as distraction is. Now, these 3 kinds of distraction. Sense fear is a big distraction. Getting into jhana can be a big distraction. And getting into the material jhanas, even though it's not much, it's still some distraction. It still pulls you away. Friend, how is a renewal of distraction in the future generated? Friend, renewal of distraction in the future is generated through the delighting in this and that on the part of beings who are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. You see how all the teaching I've been giving you, they're just kind of weaving together, just like a fine cloth. Friend, how is renewal of distractions in the future not generated? Friend, with the fading away of ignorance, with the arising of true knowledge, and with the cessation of craving, renewal of distractions in the future is not generated. So you have to go up to these factors for right view and look at that again, because where'd they go? It was on the page before. No, it was on this one. Oh, but these 5 factors. It is assisted by virtue, keeping your precepts without breaking them. Learning from direct knowledge. Discussion, serenity, and insight. Okay? that's how distractions are not brought into the future. First jhana. Friend, what is the first jhana? Here, friend, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. A monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and examining thought with joy and pleasure born of seclusion. This is called the first jhana. Friend, how many factors does the first jhana have? Friend, the first jhana has 5 factors. Here, when a monk has entered upon the first jhana, there occur thinking, examining thought, joy, happiness, and unification of mind. Now, in Pali, they use the word ekaggata. And if you look up the definitions of ekaggata, there's a lot of different definitions. Pali scholars generally, they will break ekaggata down. Eka means one. and Kaggata means path or way. So there's one way. Now they take this to mean one-pointed concentration. And it doesn't mean that. You look at the next word down in the Pali dictionary and it says ikagga, not ekaggata. They take the TA off. And it says ikagga means tranquility, means coming together of the mind so that it's unified and stays on your object of meditation without a lot of distraction, or without any distraction, really. So, the almost everybody in the Theravada world will give the definition of one-pointed mind, and it's not that. Even though your mind can be very tranquil and be on the object of meditation without any distraction, that is a unified mind. Your mind is pulled together. Everything is very nice. But it's not one-pointed, because one-pointed infers that you've been practicing a kind of meditation where you haven't seen craving. And one-pointed concentration does not lead to nibbana. If you have one-pointed concentration, you never go deep enough with your understanding to see. And when you practice vipassana, they are very big on seeing impermanence, suffering, and not self. They don't know what not self is for the most part. But it says in the Mahāvagga, which is a book of discipline, it says you can see one or all of these 3 characteristics without ever seeing dependent origination. But when you see dependent origination, you always see these 3 characteristics. So the overemphasis on just seeing anicca, dukkha, anatta is surface knowledge still. And that's one of the things that blew my mind, because I went to Burma for 2 years. I was very successful at the practice. I understood impermanence very well, and I wasn't satisfied with the end result. What they said was Nibbana. I didn't feel right. So I came back to Malaysia and I started teaching loving-kindness meditation, because I couldn't teach with a clear mind. I couldn't teach straight Vipassana the way it was being taught. And I happened to be at the biggest monastery in Malaysia, and the head monk there is extremely famous. And every Friday night he would give a talk, and it got so popular that between 300 and 500 people would come and listen to his talk. When I got invited there, the head monk said, "I'm getting old. I want you to teach every other Friday night talk." So I started getting more and more of a reputation of being successful at teaching loving-kindness meditation. A monk came through from Sri Lanka, stayed there. Got up after giving a talk, he came down, we started talking about what I was talking about the night before. And he said, "I understand you teach meditation. How do you teach it?" And I told him. And he said, "Well, you're teaching the meditation right, but you're using the language of the Visuddhimagga. Put down the Visuddhimagga, put it on the shelf, and just go to the suttas," which is, well, yeah, of course. You know. But always before, when I'd gone to the suttas, I didn't understand it, because the understanding of the Visuddhimagga is different, and I was using that as my main book. So when I put down the Visuddhimagga, I started reading the suttas. I understood what the suttas were saying. And I also understood that people that were practicing straight Vipassana had no relaxed step. And when even to this day, I can go up to very famous teachers. They've been successfully, in their eyes, successfully teaching Vipassana meditation for 40, 45 years. And I ask them, what is craving? How does craving manifest? How are you supposed to recognize it? It's talked about all through the book. And the basic answer I got from everybody is desire. And that's not even close to it. How are you supposed to see desire? What does that mean? So then I start talking to them about how I see it manifest as tension and tightness in head, they kind of shrug me off and we go our separate ways. Now, I was a very advanced meditator. And as soon as I started practicing with that relaxed step, I knew I was going so much deeper than I ever had before. It was remarkable. So I told the head monk that I was going to go out and be by myself for a couple of weeks. I was going to go to Thailand. And I told him where I was going, because there was a big cave there that I really liked. And I was reading a sutta in the morning and then practicing all the rest of the day. And it got so interesting that after 2 weeks I said, I can't quit, I got to keep going. And I wound up doing a self-retreat for about 3 months. And then he sent a monk to come get me. So I had to stop. But just by adding this one little tiny extra step of relaxing that tension and tightness that you have in your head, it changed the entire meditation. It went from one pointed concentration to an awareness, seeing things start to come up from a long ways away. And you start to see, eventually, you start seeing the links of dependent origination. And I was in new territory. This book had just come out. And I didn't know anything about this book. And somebody said, well, we just got a whole bunch of copies of this in. I'll give you a copy of it. And as soon as I started reading the suttas, everything made sense. And you can tell when a sutta doesn't fit. You can tell where there's mistakes if you have the direct practice. Now, what I tell people when they practice with me for any length of time, I don't want you to read anything. Because you read about Buddhism, you're just going to get confused. You practice. You listen to Dhamma talks and you practice. I told Kema she had to do that for a year because she was an avid reader of everything, and boy, was her mind confused about Buddhism. And then after a year, then I would give her a little tiny pamphlet to read and get her to come back and tell me what it meant. After 2 years, I was giving her smaller books. After 3 years, I was giving her big books. And she still complains because I give her way too much to read. She doesn't have time to read it. But she understands it. She understands it very well because of the practice. When you get around, quote, Buddhist scholars, they don't know what they're talking about because they're using their intellectual knowledge to try to get answers. And intellectual knowledge is so slow compared to direct knowledge. So, I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but we'll continue on now. Friend, how many factors are abandoned in the first jhana and how many factors are possessed? Friend, in the first jhana, 5 factors are abandoned and 5 factors are possessed. What are the 5 factors that are abandoned?
Essential desire, sloth, trembling, resistance.
The 5 hindrances. See, one of the things that people, when they practice one-pointed concentration, their mind goes so deep and it suppresses any of the hindrances, so they're not able to recognize them when they get out of that. But the hindrances are your teacher. They're your best friend. They're showing you where your attachment is, and they're helping you to improve your mindfulness because you have to be able to recognize it, release it, relax, smile, and come back. And this is not done verbally. This is done in a flow. I gave a talk one time and I was talking about the 6 R's are a flow, and this lady said, "Oh, you mean we have to roll our R's?" And that was it exactly. Here, when a monk has entered upon the first jhana, sensual desire is abandoned. Ill will is abandoned. Sloth and torpor are abandoned. Restlessness and anxiety are abandoned. Doubt is abandoned. And there occur thinking, examining thought, joy, happiness, and unification of mind. Now, how do you tell when you're in a jhana? How do you tell when you get out of the jhana? Because a hindrance arises. Your mindfulness wasn't sharp enough, and all of a sudden the hindrance is there. How did that happen? How did that arise? When you start looking at how these things occur, rather than why they occur, because why doesn't matter. It's all impersonal anyway. It's all just stuff. So you don't need to get involved in the thinking about why. That's for psychologists to work with. When you start looking at how all of this stuff happens, you start going deeper into your practice. And it becomes incredibly interesting and fun. And you want to keep going. You don't want to stop. This is how the first jhana has 5 factors are abandoned and 5 factors possessed. Friend, are these 5 faculties Friend, these 5 faculties each have a separate field, a separate domain, and do not experience each other's field and domain. That is, the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, body faculty. Now these 5 factors, each having a separate field, a separate domain, do not experience each other's field and domain. You don't see a smell, right? It's separate. What is their resort? What experiences their fields and domains? Friend, these 5 faculties each have a separate field, a separate domain, and do not experience each other's field and domain. That is, the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty. Now these 5 faculties, each having a separate field, a separate domain, not experiencing each other's field and domain, have mind as their resort. And mind experiences their fields and domains. Friend, as to these 5 faculties, that is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body faculty, what do these 5 faculties stand in dependence on? Friend, as to these 5 faculties, that is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body faculty, these 5 faculties stand in dependence on vitality. Friend, what does vitality stand in dependence on? What does it depend on? Vitality stands in dependence on heat. Friend, What does heat stand in dependence on? Heat stands in dependence on vitality. Got it? Just now, friend, we understood the Venerable Sāriputta to have said vitality stands in dependence on heat, and now we understand him to say heat stands in dependence on vitality. How should the meaning of these statements be regarded? That's a reasonable question, wouldn't you say? In that case, friend, I shall give you a simile. For some wise men here understand the meaning of a statement by means of a simile. Just as when an oil lamp is burning, its radiance is seen in dependence on the flame, and its flame is seen in dependence on its radiance. Can't have one without the other. They depend on each other, or you wouldn't be able to see it. Right? Okay. Vital formations. Friend, are vital formations things that can be felt, or are vital formations one thing that can be felt one thing and things that can be felt another? Vital formations are not things that can be felt. If vital formation were things that can be felt, then a monk who has entered upon the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness would not be seen to emerge from it. They'd be dead. Because vital formations are one thing and things that can be felt another. A monk who has entered upon the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness can be seen to emerge from it. You can sit in the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness when you become an anagami or an arahat for up to 7 days. That's not 7 days of squirming around. That's not 7 days of wanting a drink of water or eating food. It's all turned off. Heartbeat goes down very, very low. No respiration in the lungs, through the skin. There's no consciousness. There's one sutta where this one ascetic got into a deep state of absorption, concentration, and he was sitting beside a stream of water, and there was 500 bullock carts that went by him, and he said he didn't even know that happened. So the person he was talking to went to the Buddha and said, "Yeah, that's pretty good. What do you think?" And the Buddha said, "Well, I was sitting in neither perception, feeling perception nor consciousness. And I was in a barn, and there was some lightning that struck right beside the barn and killed an oxen and 2 people. And I didn't know that it happened." Why? Because there was no feeling, perception, or consciousness until you come out. So you can say, well, these two states are very close to being the same, but they're not. Because this other ascetic was sitting there, he was breathing, he was doing all the things that keep the body going. It was pretty noisy. I mean, 500 carts, bullock carts going through some water right beside you, it's going to be a noisy thing. But there was still, he had the awareness that it was there, but he didn't pay attention to it. But the Buddha didn't even know that happened until he got out of that state. And he got out of the barn, and there's all these people rushing around doing this and that with the different bodies and that sort of thing. He said, what happened? Oh, somebody got struck by lightning. Killed him. Oh, okay. Friend, when this body is bereft of how many states is it then discarded, forsaken, left lying senseless like a log? Friend, when a body is bereft of 3 states, vitality, heat, and consciousness, it is then discarded and forsaken, left lying senseless like a log. Friend, what is the difference between one who is dead, who has completed his time, and a monk who has entered upon the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness? Friend, in the case of one who is dead, who has completed his time, his bodily formations have ceased and subsided. His verbal formations have ceased and subsided. His mental formations have ceased and subsided. His vitality is exhausted. His heat has been dissipated, and his faculties are fully broken up. In the case of a monk who has entered upon the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness, his bodily formations have ceased and subsided. His verbal formations have ceased and subsided. His mental formations have ceased and subsided, but his vitality is not exhausted. His heat has not been dissipated, and his faculties became exceptionally clear. Anytime you see somebody that is exceptionally clear and they're glowing, give them a gift. Do yourself a favor. It'll come back to you a lot of times in a lot of wonderful ways. This is the difference between one who is dead, who has completed his time, and a monk who has entered upon the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. Friend, how many conditions are there for the attainment of neither painful nor pleasant deliverance of mind? There are 4 conditions for the attainment of neither painful nor pleasant deliverance of mind. We're talking about the 4th jhana. Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a monk enters upon and abides in the 4th jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. These are the 4 conditions for the attainment of neither painful nor pleasant deliverance of mind. Friend, how many conditions are there for the attainment of the signless deliverance of mind? What is a signless deliverance of mind? There are these two conditions for the attainment of the signless deliverance of mind: non-attention to all signs and attention to the signless element. These are the two conditions for the attainment of the signless deliverance of mind. Friend, how many conditions are there for the persistence of the signless deliverance of mind? There are three conditions for the persistence of the signless deliverance of mind: non-attention to all signs, attention to the signless element, and the prior determination of its duration. Now, I have you making determinations of getting up at night, getting up, or what time to get up in the morning, and waking up smiling and happy. You do that every day. This is a lightweight determination. But your mind gets used to it after a while, and you can hit the time exactly, so you don't need an alarm clock. You just set in your mind, I'm going to sleep for until this time, and then you get up. When you make determinations in gaining mastery of the jhanas, you do this by making a determination for 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to sit no higher than the first jhana for 14 minutes and 51 seconds. For 15 minutes and 8 seconds. When you can hit that every time, then you do it for 29 minutes and 19 seconds. And you can hit that every time. Then you do it for an hour. After you do it for an hour, you make a determination that you're going to go in and out of that jhana in 6 seconds. And when you can hit that every time, then you go to the second jhana. So you start working with your determinations that way. That takes a lot more skill. But there are real advantages to do that, because you can get into any jhana that you want to point your mind at. You know, you get with somebody that's highly emotional, or they're getting close to death. You want them to feel peaceful and calm. You make a determination to be in a fourth jhana. While you're there with that person, you're fully awake, you can talk to them, you can do all kinds of different things. So being able to use these jhanas whenever you want is a very nice skill. Okay. These are the three conditions for the persistence of the signless deliverance of mind. Friend, how many conditions are there for the emergence from the signless deliverance of mind? Friend, there are these two conditions for the emergence of the signless deliverance of mind: attention to all signs and non-attention to the signless element. These are the two conditions for the emergence of the signless deliverance of mind. Friend, the immeasurable deliverance of mind, the deliverance of mind through nothingness, the deliverance of mind through voidness, the signless deliverance of mind. Are these states different in meaning and different in name, or are they one in meaning and different in name only? Friend, the immeasurable deliverance of mind, the deliverance of mind through nothingness, the deliverance of mind through voidness, the signless deliverance of mind. There is a way in which these states are different in meaning and different in name, and there is a way in which they are one in meaning and different in name only. Friend, what is the way in which these states are different in meaning and different in name? Here a monk abides, pervading 1/4 of their mind, imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above, below, around, and everywhere, and to all as to himself. Sound familiar? 6 directions? He abides pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. He abides pervading 1/4 of his mind with compassion. He abides pervading 1/4 of his mind with altruistic joy. He abides pervading 1/4 of his mind imbued with equanimity. Now, what am I talking about there? The Brahma Viharas. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above, below, around, and everywhere, as to all himself, to all as to himself. He abides pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. This is called the immeasurable deliverance of mind. And what, friend, is a deliverance of mind through nothingness? Here, with the complete surmounting of the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, a monk enters upon and abides in the base of nothingness. This is called the deliverance of mind through nothingness. And what, friends, is a deliverance of mind through voidness? Here, a monk gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or an empty hut reflects thus: this is void of a self, or of what belongs to a self. This is called the deliverance of mind through voidness. Now, what are we talking about here? Developing a mind that has no craving. Not me, it's not mine, none of this stuff that comes up. In other words, when you get to that state, you start getting dispassionate. Yeah, it's there, but it's not mine. Came up by itself. It's just stuff. And what, friend, is the signless deliverance of mind? Here, with a non-attention to all signs, a monk enters upon and abides in the signless collectedness of mind. This is called the signless deliverance of mind. And this is the way in which these states are different in meaning and different in name. And what, friend, is the way in which these states are one in meaning and different in name only? Lust is a maker of measurement. Hate is a maker of measurement. Delusion is a maker of measurement. In a monk whose taints are destroyed, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a palm tree or palm stump. done away with, so they are no longer subject to future arising. What is lust, hatred, and delusion? Another way of describing craving. I like it. I don't like it. I. That's what delusion is. See, that's another definition that you don't get outside of Buddhism. Because delusion means you're deluded. You haven't got a clue. Well, with any time you take something personally, you don't have a clue. Everything is part of an impersonal process. Of all the kinds of measurement, deliverance of mind, of all the kinds of immeasurable deliverance of mind, the unshakable deliverance of mind is pronounced the best. Now that unshakable deliverance of mind is void of lust, void of hate, and void of delusion. It's void of craving. Lust is a something. Hate is a something. Delusion is a something. If a monk whose taints are destroyed, in a monk whose taints are destroyed, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, done away with, so that there are no longer subject to future arising. Of all the kinds of deliverance of mind through nothingness, the unshakable deliverance of mind is pronounced the best. Now that unshakable deliverance of mind is void of lust, void of hate, and void of delusion. Lust is a maker of signs. Hate is a maker of signs. Delusion is a maker of signs. In a monk whose taints are destroyed, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, done away with, so they are no longer subject to future arising. Of all the kinds of signless deliverance of mind, the unshakable deliverance of mind is pronounced the best. Now that unshakable deliverance of mind is void of lust, void of hate, and void of delusion. That is the way in which these states are one in meaning and different in name only. That is what the Venerable Sāriputta said. The Venerable Mahā Koṭṭhita was satisfied and delighted in Sāriputta's words. So that gives you some idea about what cognition is and how cognition, feeling, and perception are intertwined. Now, in the book, it only talks about feeling and perception, and I add and consciousness, because these are conjoined, not disjoined. So you can't have just these two by themselves, you have to have the consciousness along with it. Okay. You have any questions? Okay.
What exactly is a sign?
Anything, any kind of distraction, but it's caused by craving.
So, I mean, the ekagata,
Uh-huh.
does ta mean anything?
It does, and I can't remember exactly what it is. have to go back and look in the books again.
Well, did they use the wrong word? Clearly.
No, but what they do is they take they try to make it a compound word, and it's not supposed to be.
Okay.
It's supposed to be ekagata. But because they want to get fancy with their intellectual pursuit, they break it apart.
It's a translation.
Yeah. Yeah, the second or third translation of ekagata is tranquility. But I like the word unification of mind. Now look at the word unification, uni.
Yeah.
One pulling together.
Everything coming together.
Mhm.
Not whole, just.
And think of the word universe. Universe. What is that saying? One song. Cute, huh? Okay. Let's share some merit then. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.